साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. चित्तवृत्ति निरोधः इति योगः. Suspension of thoughts in mind is yoga. But suspension of thoughts in mind can be brought about mechanically also through pranayam, through drugs, through sleep, coma, shock. These are different ways by which a mechanical suspension of thoughts can be brought about in the mind. And this is not equal to yoga. Yoga is when the self is established in the self. So at the empirical level, at this moment we feel we are an individual. So when individual self is established in the absolute self, the nature of both is exactly the same. This imagined separation, this imagined duality has to dissolve. And who is owning this duality? The individual. Then yoga happens. Getting into samadhi is not equal to yoga. Nirvikalpa samadhi is suspension of thoughts. Merely suspension of thoughts. But we have to go beyond that. Coming to this point of suspension of thoughts itself is a great step. The mind, looking at the mind is made up of thoughts. Thoughts are sattvic, rajasic or tamasic. Tamasic thoughts are gross in nature. Gross is the whole world, things, beings, space, air, fire, water, earth. In fact, when you go a bit deeper, every thought is itself gross in nature. We may call it subtle, but it is still an object of cognition. But let's stop at the world. Tamasic thoughts are the thoughts about things and beings of the world, including this body. As long as the mind is intoxicated by the things and beings of the world, it is stuck at the tamasic level. One must wean their mind away from these. The next is the rajasic thoughts. What are Rajasic thoughts about? They are dynamic, they are active, and that itself explains that these Rajasic thoughts make one do something or the other. They keep you involved in activity. Such a mind always wants to do something, can't sit quiet. Always some project, some goal, some destination, some pilgrimage, some activity has to go on, physical or mental. As long as the individual is under the influence of tamasic thoughts or rajasic thoughts, he cannot traverse any distance in spirituality because he is enslaved by these two dispositions. But then, because of some pranayam, due to some japa, before going to sleep, when the mind is naturally quiet, after getting up from sleep, when the mind is naturally quiet, if he exposes his mind to these sattvic thoughts, and the flip result is the mind is not entertaining the rajasic and tamasic thoughts. As he is weaning himself away, and weaning away from rajasic and tamasic thoughts is only by focusing on something higher, something diviner, something worthy. And yes, you can bring about that niruddha state if you do. Merely by pranayam also it can be brought about. And as the mind becomes empty of tamasic and rajasic thoughts, the sattva is allowed to be invoked. A single pointed mind is equal to a quiet mind, is equal to a purified mind, is equal to an expanded mind. And in this mind, where the influence of rajas and tamas is minimal, there the sattvic thoughts are allowed to come forth. When the sattvic thought comes forth, the stage that comes over a period of time, a stage comes wherein the seeker becomes absolutely clear about the consciousness and matter. Like I am very clear that you are separate to me, similarly the seeker becomes very clear that he is made up of two things, and those two things are consciousness and matter. And he comes to the conclusion that consciousness I am, and this consciousness is the subject itself. It's a different matter that he is not able to stay there long, but he must attempt to come to this point again and again and again. The more he remains as himself, as the consciousness, not thinks that he is consciousness, to that extent this mind, which was, that stage was called Viveka Khyati, it leads to Dharma Megha Samadhi. And to the extent the seeker is being with himself, to the exclusion of everything else, to every other thought in his mind, a point comes. This is Tadadrashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. It will not happen straight. It may happen straight away, it may not happen straight away. But if it doesn't happen straight away, as we are moving towards Tadadrashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam, when the mind is quiet, your attention is on the conscious principle that you are. Mind keeps clicking in saying that I am the conscious principle, I am the conscious principle, because we are so addicted to some support of thought. And we have to find it within us. Our self-talk must be in such a manner that we go beyond the thoughts to come to realize that we are in spite of the thoughts. And for that we have to stop giving value and attention to the thoughts, stop reacting to the thoughts, come to a conclusion within ourselves that the self is independent, self is illuminator of all the thoughts. In my presence all the thoughts are coming and going. And this type of self-talk which we have contemplated, thought over so many classes, satsangs, it must click in. That is the right interaction that the mind can have with itself. And the more we are in Tadadrashtuhu Swarupa Avasthanam, the more we are in the self as the self, without any support of the thought, the mind which is made up of sattvic, rajasic, tamasic thoughts, these are the three modes or moods, and we see throughout the day that the mind is continuously fluctuating between these three types of thoughts. It starts coming into equilibrium. The thought waves of sattva, rajas, tamas, instead of going up and down, they remain in balance. When this happens, and one is able to maintain this state for a long period of time, all the samskaras which are there in the subconscious mind, they may come up. But as long as you are in the self, as the self, by yourself, all these samskaras which appear on the surface of the mind as thoughts, they start getting roasted. They start becoming impotent. Why? Because they are not getting any attention and value. And these are the thoughts or desires, the samskaras, the subconscious impressions coming to the forefront appear as desires, desire appears as a thought. They are unable to influence the seeker, and when they are not able to influence, they die their own death. uh, the mind is exposed to this over a long period of time, the seeker's mind enters into nirbija samadhi. Nirbija samadhi means there is no seed to begin anything in the mind. Only a seed can germinate. And this seed is the subconscious impression, the samskar, the vasana. But nirbija samadhi means that there is no samskar coming up to disturb the poise that you are in. All this was possible because the mind was focused on the self. Or the self is abiding in itself. If you say mind is focused on the self, you're moving from tamasic thoughts to rajasic thoughts to sattvic thoughts, and the climax of the sattvic thought is I am that, because it is focused on the self. Even that thought needs to be dropped because it is still a seed. Aham brahmasmi vritti. If the mind says I am that, there is still a seed. Still there is objectivity of the self. Therefore, Yoga Sutras say tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Avasthanam be established. Tada, then drashtuhu, having seen the self, be established in the self, in the swarup, in the essence, in the witnessing consciousness. Be that witnessing consciousness, not witnessing the mind. Swarupe avasthanam turns this witness. The witness was witnessing something else other than it, and now the witness is aware of its own being, of its own presence. This is the language which we can use. An attempt can be made, and in that one is established in oneself. This is one way of looking at our mind and coming to be established in the self. Don't do this mechanically.